teaching them how to budget. Every kid, once they're 12, I teach them how to go start their own company. And so I've got one son did chickens and raised 40 chickens, sold the eggs, and another did beekeeping, another one, other types of animal care and daycare, and teach them how to go save money at a young age, how interest can be compounded, and lots of stuff like that. People are wildly overconfident in their intuition on a short, unstructured interview. And what most research shows is that you would be better off taking a group of 10 random resumes, rolling the dice, picking them, than you would going with your instincts. I recommend an easier scale than that, a 1, 2, and 3. If you're really bad at interviewing, just 1 and 2, pass or fail. And then whoever passes the most questions, hire that person.
We are live on the Objective Hiring Show. Today we're joined by Dan. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Tim, it's great to be here. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. And so to be able to be here with you, your audience, and talk about something I love, it's great.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have you. And so I'm speaking to you from Sydney. Whereabouts in the world are you joining us from?
So today I'm in Utah. Yesterday was in Henderson, Nevada. The week before that, Texas. I'm a little all over the place, but today, Utah.
Excellent. And would love to hear a little bit more about yourself. Like, who are we talking to today?
Yeah, so a little bit of background on me. Grew up in the Bay Area, and dad was a sales VP, ran the Western 17 states for AT&T back before AT&T had any concept of mobile. So I saw sales from a young age. And then when we moved to Utah, I got involved with a company because my dad's like, hey, if you want nice shoes, you want a nice phone, you're going to buy it yourself. And so I got a job. And in sales, that's outsourced sales in particular is one of the only places that would hire you as a teenager where you're still going to school. Got into that and very quickly learned making data-driven decisions in the hiring process, in the management process, in the coaching process could be a core differentiator for me. So that got me off into a really good career trajectory where I joined a early stage startup, Qualtrics, joined as employee number 15 in the basement of their company, was with them for 13 years, took it to an $8 billion exit, got really close with Excel and Sequoia. And then as SAP acquired Qualtrics, I had a big decision. Do I want to lead larger and larger sales organizations, or did I want to go work closely with them and other VCs to go and help organizations make the types of revenue transformations we made at Qualtrics? So I took that pivot, jumped over into starting Database, and for the last several years now, been helping top VC funded companies make their next revenue transformation. In fact, one of our top clients right now is getting ready to go public in the next couple of years, and we're helping them get ready for that. And so that's me on the business side. Personal side, got 6 kids. People are usually shocked when they hear that, ranging from oh yeah, it's a big number. Our oldest is almost 18. And it goes 18, 16, 13, 10, and twin 6-year-olds that almost turned 7. And so love being a dad. And then last but not least, global citizen. There is rarely a 2-month period of time where I'm not somewhere else in the world outside of the US, and really have enjoyed being able to learn how to apply a lot of things we'll talk about today in any market, because hiring legally and appropriately can be different per country, but appropriately should be the same everywhere. And so anyway, that's me.
I'm interested now. You mentioned you've got 6 children. Have you found yourself almost being like a data-driven dad in any way?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Just down to, it's like, okay, I've got this much time. How do I make sure that each kid knows that they're loved? And I'm pretty obsessed with fairness, and so it's that each kid, that every 6 weeks I do a one-on-one date with them, and I won't do the next kid until I've done all the other 5. And paying a lot of attention to their school metrics, and not trying to be overly critical if they're below standard, but push them as hard as they can and show them data as to like what's possible. You live in a world where, in my belief, anything's possible. And like, this is what top 1% looks like, top 10%. Um, Teaching them how to budget. Every kid, once they're 12, I teach them how to go start their own company. And so I've got one son did chickens and raised 40 chickens, sold the eggs, and did that. Another did beekeeping. Another one, other types of animal care and daycare, and teach them how to go save money at a young age, how interest can be compounded, and lots of stuff like that.
They got their mini MBA already before they're even 18.
That's the goal. In fact, my 16-year-old came with me today. I was speaking at a really cool company here in Utah today. That's why I came back to Utah. And even though he's a sophomore, he's doing mostly college classes. And so he's able to do it kind of at his own pace. And he came with me and he's learning. He's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. Because he says he wants to be in sales. And yeah, so he was with me today and I got to go see all that.
Now, I remember over the years, several Americans telling me that some of the best salespeople in America tend to be from Utah. And that's a broad generalization, but have you found that that's true?
I would say Utah's got a pretty unique culture. And the culture comes from a couple things. In general, particularly if you go into the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, lots of internal morality pushed, whether because there's a predominant faith, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that drives morality and being kind in general. So then the culture, as people not from that religion come in, they also tend to adopt be kind to others. So it's a high integrity culture, also lots of farming, horsemanship, and then the local university, its top degrees produce doctors and finance people. And so then when you start naturally gravitating into, so the doctors go into the doctor's path, finance people tend to get pretty senior roles. And it's not uncommon to see finance people become COOs as well as CFOs running operations. And so then operations grows, customer support's only one click out from sales. And so anyway, when you combine integrity driven culture, hard work ethic, there's a lot of people open for business and sales.
That's a pretty good combination. I'd like to have grown up in a culture like that. That would be great.
My kids love it, and as long as Utah also can be a little bubble-ish because there's so much pressure on that. I think experiencing out of Utah, in Utah, you get the best of both worlds.
Now, data-based. Tell me more about your motivations for starting that company, how it all started back in the day. It's been nearly 9 years, is that right?
Yeah. So in 2013, what happened is Excel and Sequoia invested in Qualtrics, and I got really close with them. Essentially, what started off with is they were very interested in the company and invested and wanted to know why it was working. And as they dug into how is it possible this survey software, surveys are not sexy, became so good so fast. And what they saw is a highly predictable go to market motion that was also quite profitable because there was coaching based on data, there was hiring based on data, performance and promotions based on data, quota assignment based on data. So then they started saying, hey, Dan and Ryan Smith, who's my boss, would you mind letting Dan go and coach some of our other portfolio companies? I had no idea at the time that you could charge for this. And so like, that sounds like a blast. And then I find myself helping out with Atlassian or helping out with Dropbox or helping out with some really cool companies that they invested in. Then 2016 rolls around. My brother graduates with a computer science degree and is like, Dan, I think we could operationalize a lot of what you teach in a bespoke way and create a company with it. And he's like, would you mind funding a few engineers to go in and start building the framework that we could go set it up? And frankly, we launched the first software we launched was performance management. Unbelievable takeoff in the beginning and a cataclysmic fail. In the end, people do not like being told all of the areas they need to improve unless it's private. Database was a model that made transparent all the things that were great and all the things that needed to be improved. And so then we pivoted and said, okay, well, performance management based on data is a good thing, but people don't like it. So what's another data-driven approach? And we went into the hiring model. And how could we go in, and everybody loves getting a job instead of being managed out of a job potentially. Everybody loves the idea that you're going to bring them the very best people. And so we've invested over the last year and a half only in that space. And so it's performance management and consulting for quite a while, then dropped performance management, only consulting. And performance management, we still do it, but only for clients that are completely committed. It has to be inbound. We don't proactively sell. They have to come and say, we want this, then we know it's part of their culture from the beginning. But changing somebody's culture, it's not going to happen. So we went into hiring only and consulting, and have been doing that for the last while and really enjoy it. And it's a great opportunity to work with a team that I really enjoy. It's a small, very focused team, about 8 of us, and it's a blast.
And how have you found that transition from the performance management to hiring? Because I could imagine, having worked in a kind of similar space with similar messaging myself for 6 years, that you might get also a bit of pushback when it comes to using numbers and using facts to hire people, rather than your more traditional, what I would call gut feel approach. Sorry, more of an intuitive approach, where I kind of feel like this is the right person. Is this phrase I would hear a lot in hiring? How have you dealt with that? How often do you see that?
Yeah, it's one of the most consistent points of contention that we deal with in organizations that we consult with or use our full end-to-end hiring process. And more often than not, people want somebody that is big. You go back to caveman times, allies in times of being invaded by other tribes, or frankly, partners. And so people are wired genetically to look for allies and to look for partners to go in and procreate great families with. We are not genetically wired to pick business people. And so their instincts, which are heavily influenced by their genetics, also how much they slept the night before. Do they have an ex that laughs the same way and immediately triggers subconscious? I don't want this person. There's just something wrong with them. And to convince people, and there's a professor named Professor Dana, and focus for him is basically that it spent most of their PhD career. People are wildly overconfident in their intuition on a short, unstructured interview. And what most research shows is that you would be better off taking a group of 10 random resumes, rolling the dice, picking them, than you would going with your instincts. And the reason why is because at least that's random instead of picking attempted clones of yourself or things that are going to get you in HR trouble.
And so, yeah, you've just given a devastating account of our shortcomings as humans in trying to use our intuition in hiring people. So then, when you present this evidence, I guess, to potential clients, do they accept it? Like, I often find that sort of that aggregate view is lost on people, because it's more about, unless it's them and maybe they've seen their own biases, they're unlikely to change. I don't know. How have you found that? Or do you just forget about people who are like non-believers and go, well, I can't help you unless you already accept the fact that using data makes better decisions? It's almost like a qualification thing for you.
Yes, it's a little bit of both. So most of our clients don't really care because we go in and find the people. So if we're finding the people, screening the people, bringing the people to them, then it doesn't matter to them what process we use. And since we can't force them to go in and hire, then there can become a rub. And so what I usually will find, I'll give a really good example. There was a client that we worked with for quite a while, and we started working for recruiting for a frontline sales leader role. We brought them candidates that were just off the charts. And the feedback was not ever data driven. It wasn't, hey, their performance here wasn't strong enough, or this skill that's measurable. There's just something they're missing. And in this case, it was a member of my team that was running the search. And she kept coming back to me, Dan, this is the feedback they're giving. I don't know what to do about it. And I was like, let me meet with their VP of sales. And so I went with their VP of sales and I said, I've got a suggestion for you. I've never met the hiring manager. I don't know if it's a he or a she, but I'm going to tell you, based on their responses, why they've rejected these last 3 candidates. I bet they are an athlete, tall, white, and male. And they're like, how the hell would you even come up with that kind of guess? And I said, because the last 3 candidates that were rejected because it didn't feel right were Asian or non-white, female, and didn't assess their athleticism, so I have no idea. But I would be shocked if they were playing on the football team that's representative of, my guess would be, the rest of the other players, leaders on that leader's team. And when that VP heard that, and that I was able to predict who the hiring manager was without knowing them, because it was the opposite of the candidates that we were bringing, then we had to come to a conclusion. It's like, okay, well, that director of sales isn't going to change their mind. And so let's go in and have the account manager go in and meet with that hiring manager and say, what do you actually care about? And I'm going to go in and just focus on those things. And we came up with a very short list of the things that mattered to them. And then just focused on that. We ended up not using our normal hiring standards. And all of those other candidates have now been placed in other great companies and are doing really well, just not at that company. And in the end, what did we place? We placed an athlete that was tall and spoke more like an athlete. And we just went and looked for athletes. And it's like, okay, if that's what you want, there's plenty of athletes. There's nothing wrong with athletes. And if that's what you need to have the it factor, then we'll go in and do that for you. But most of the time, we bring in candidates. It's rare that 1 and 2 doesn't get hired.
And that's taking this very objective, data-driven approach that your clients have bought into and accept, because they realize at the end of the day, it's going to make them, at least that's a good thing with sales, I have to say, is if you're right and the hiring method works, they are very happy because it's very obvious and measurable once they join what's happening. It's a little bit even harder for like roles that we've worked on, analytics, data science, where you kind of a step away from revenue, or at least one step. I guess with sales, it becomes pretty clear if they're winning or not.
Yeah, so there's a few things. So we do recruiting across the entire revenue spectrum. So it could be sales, could be marketing, could be customer success or account management, could be operations within revenue. So these tend to be more of like your consultants, your data scientists, and things like that. So it is, what I've found is that for almost any role, you can build a data-driven approach to assess their skills. And so what I've done is I've narrowed it down to 5 things that that work. How strong are they in applied intellect? So not IQ, just as you would measure it on like an IQ test, but do they actually apply their intellect? And so I have 4 measures to go in and assess that. Then, how is their emotional awareness? And this includes things from a locus of control. Do they take ownership for their outcomes, or do they blame, or is it other, or is it luck? To do they respect humanity versus narcissism? And so anyway, so that's the second area. And there's 4 things that we do to assess that. Past performance in whatever they've chosen to do. And sometimes we recruit people fresh out of school and they're just choosing, did you do well? And I don't care if it was in a track meet, in a piano recital, if it's in a board game competition you're interested in, but do they excel in whatever they go after? And then the more senior they get in their career, do they excel in the field of choice? And then culture fit. Now, culture fit to me is not, would you want to go have a beer with them or have a glass of water with them or go play pickleball with them? One of my favorite hobbies. It's, are you loyal? Do you stick to a company and earn promotions? Are you willing to work hard to achieve an outcome? And then there might be a very, very specific skill set that that organization cares about. If you go look at of the 20 different things that we measure across those 5 areas, only one of them actually gets into the job skill. Then what we do is we proactively recruit people that are already in that field, that as they go through, a highly emotionally and applied intellectual person who will work hard, who's proven they can succeed in the past in whatever they choose to do, and is loyal, they're going to thrive. And in fact, in leadership interviews that we do, we found 80% of leaders that we place not only succeed in the job, but earn at least 1 more promotion in that. And that's after placing over 100 leaders.
It sounds like your approach then is quite standardized. Like you have your model as opposed to, oh, here's this new client. What do you want? We'll optimize it for you. But I guess there's probably still some element of tailoring it, tweaking it, customizing it for what the customer wants or what they think they want. Or are you more like, no, we know what you need. This is it.
So they'll share with us things like it matters that they have this industry experience. So it could be they're coming from the cybersecurity space, or they're coming from oil and gas, or they're coming from wherever it is, SaaS, SMB, mid market, whatever it is. So they'll say it matters to us that they have this industry experience, that they've had this scope of responsibility, that they maybe like university requirements, whatever requirements they have are. And then we go in and apply what I just said. Now, that one example that I shared with you, in the end, we're like, okay, well, you're the client. You don't value the way that we screen. So we'll just give you what you want. But that's very rare, maybe 1 in 20 customers. Do we do that with most? They're actually just pretty excited about the people that we bring them, and they don't really care about the process. They're just happy with the people.
Which method do you think at the end of the day would make them happier? Like if you had a method that was like, I'm going to somehow unlock exactly what you want, quote unquote, unlock all your biases. I know all your little triggers. I kind of can imagine exactly the kinds of people you're going to hire and not, versus this, let's say, more objective data driven approach. Which one, if we maybe forget about the long-term performance of the candidates, if it's just like, my job is to place people, to get hires, to put bums on seats, if you were, optimizing for that metric, would it be, yeah, the objective data driven, or the more subjective, I'm going to tap into all your biases and read your mind approach?
Yeah, I'd say that they for sure short term want the latter. They want you to go after, like if I were to just open it up, hey, we'll give you whatever you're looking for and tell me the characteristics you care short term, because they're just going to find a bunch of clones of themselves that they'd love to go have a pizza with, or go in and hang out with. But long term, and I mean, in our case, we want clients measured in years, that when they've got the next role, the next 50 roles that they want to go with us again, they need performers. And so by going through, okay, what matters to you as it relates to skills, industries, experience, etc., and then we'll bring you people that meet all of that plus a much higher bar that we'll go bring to you. Then those individuals perform, they get promoted, they then want to recruit for their team, and then they call you back. And in almost any leadership role, after 3 to 4 years, someone's going to leave. And if that person that hired us a database to go in and help them recruit and pick the right people, they leave, and we only catered to their personal needs, we have to leave with them. If we recruited a whole bunch of high performers, those performers that stayed want to maintain you keep working with them. So you give them what they need in a way that they love, and it works out great. They also really like the write-ups we do. We'll write a pretty intense data-driven approach that will show them in each of those categories what percentile they're in. So they know maybe they're getting a top 1 percentile on EQ, middle 50% on motor, and versus top 10% on motor, top 30% in EQ. They can kind of go in and think about what matters to them, because they don't usually assess any of those things. And so they tend to like the write-ups that we provide as well.
Right. So it's the evidence that you share that supports what you've actually done behind the scenes, then is really important, as opposed to, oh, don't worry, we figured it out. Here's the best candidate. Like, we've done all the work for you. You show them a bit of the logic as well.
Oh yeah, we show them the exact percentiles. We show them why they think they'll do well. If there's if there's areas, particularly if they're bottom quartile in any one of the 20 different measures that we go in and assess on, then we bring that to their attention to make sure that they know this is an area of weakness. And they're really strong in these others, but it's masked a little bit on their overall score because this one area of weakness or 2 areas of weakness, whatever it is. And then we have minimum bars that they have to score at in order to even introduce them to them. So they know they always pass the bar if we intro them, and then they'll hear their strengths and weaknesses, and they value that.
Is there ever any sense of matching the right level of candidate with the right level of company, in the sense that, maybe in theory, the best candidate is a 1%er in all of those areas, but realistically, they would maybe have their choice of company. So you would only want to place them with the best because they're only going to last if they're in a really good environment. Is there some sense of like leveling out the quality of candidate and quality of company?
I try not to do the quality of candidate and quality of company as much. And instead, just the clients that we work with, if they're not a company that's going to take care of their people and not a great employer, it's not worth selling for them. Going in and having candidates also come back and say, you don't ever want to get placed by database. You're going to get with a garbage company. It's just not worth it. The quick money isn't there. So what we do instead, a lot of our approach is outbound. Since we work globally, we place candidates all throughout Europe, throughout Southeast Asia, Australia, the United States, Latin America. More often than not, we're starting for a very specific job cold, and we have an outbound approach to go in and find these candidates. And so it might be a VP of marketing based out of Mexico City with a very, very highly opinionated in marketing CEO. So when we're reaching out in that case, they may have the title of VP, but they're going to be expected to take a lot of direction. Our outbound approach would be if you're looking for a CEO that's going to mentor you to the next level of your marketing career while you're the top of marketing, this is the right company. Then when people respond to us, we've already psychologically matched them with the type of manager that they're going to have. So we spend an exorbitant amount of time once a client signs with us getting to know the hiring manager so that when we're outbounding, we know the type of leader going in. We've got a leader right now, a CEO. He has no interest in what the head of sales is going to have to say. He just wants the head of sales to do what they're told. And so we're very clear. You're going to be the head of sales, but you will be taking direction directly from the CEO and expected to act on it for no less than a year. So if you're looking to kind of go spread your wings and guide the strategy, wrong company. If you're looking for a CEO that is brilliant, that already has a plan and needs an execution minded sales leader, you're the right one.
Uh, what you've described is fantastic. One of the issues I'm guessing is in hiring, you've only got so many hours to talk to the candidate, to talk to the company, to get meetings, to unpack, to gather the requirements. Do you ever find that some companies push back on the level of thought that's gone into digging into their requirements and understanding them and what exactly they want in the role? Or are they kind of accepting of that because at the end of the day, the outcomes speak for themselves?
Yeah, they like it because if you look at a normal hiring role, give you an example. Another client just talked to them earlier this morning, and they're looking for a CRM administrator. And so somebody on the operational side of revenue is going to run their whole CRM. They posted the job, 300 applicants. Of those, 280 needed to be screened. And so if you go look at it and say like, okay, so their inbound approach, somebody, even if they could read through a resume, click all the buttons in the applicant tracking system to reject them, it would take them, let's call it 2 minutes at least per resume to go in and get it done. So now you're at 560 wasted minutes, almost 10 hours. The 1 hour kickoff call with us, and you are going to review all of the candidates we send you because we're not going to send you very many. Rarely will we send more than 2 or 3 maximum at a time. We'll actually stop the search until we see how those 3 progress because we're so confident they're going to hire. I mean, a bad situation would be 1 in 4. And so in a normal situation, it's 1 of 2. We also don't want to waste candidates' time by reaching out too much. And so anyway, the time savings, all I have to do is say, last job you posted, how many applicants? How long does it take you per candidate to screen? Yeah, 2 to 5 minutes, just kind of depending. And how many of those went well? Yeah, you wasted 10 hours. And so when they're like, I just got to spend an hour doing a kickoff with you, and then you'll go handle the rest, and then you're going to send me people that you put your own name and reputation on. And it's more of a sniper approach instead of just spray and pray. They like that a lot.
Now, in gathering all these data points about the candidates, I'm gathering most of this is through like a structured interviews that you're giving them, mixed with tests, perhaps. Like, yeah, how are you gathering the data points about the candidates?
Yeah, so this part goes about 15 years into my career to develop the different instruments. And so we use a combination. If it's an entry level role, it's a combination of a test and an exam that they go through. that we've developed, and a video interview. And if it is a more senior candidate, only the video interview. They actually skip the test. And then through a combination of, again, we're not a large volume recruiting firm. And so at any given time, we limit it only to a maximum of 6 roles per recruiter. And so they have enough time to go in and focus on it. All recruiters are trained in grading the online interviews. Every single question gets a score on a 1 to 5. Before they're certified on my team, they have to be able to score within 5/10ths, 5/100ths of my score. And now we're training AI models to be able to do it. But for right now, it's still human. It's going to take us another 1.5 years to get the AI smart enough to be able to listen, read the response, assess industry norms and things like that to be able to give it the right score. But our recruiting team, so if I score them a 3.8, they've got to be somewhere between a 3.75 and a 3.85. Once they can do that very consistently, they're certified and they can do it on their own. Then they go into, some of our clients are not comfortable doing skills interviews, particularly early stage startups. They wouldn't know how to go in and assess the skill of that, so we'll do that for them. Others, they take it from there. And so we make it through. We now know that they've got 50-50. 1 and 2 is going to get hired. They probably would both be hired if we only sent 1 and they were hired, we sent 2 and they were hired in 2 roles. They then go through their process and then they hire them.
What do you think makes a great interviewer, as in the person asking the questions?
So they're all done there. I actually prefer no interviewer. I did a really interesting study about 8 years ago. I went in and I wanted to see how much does my own bias come into play when I meet the candidate and they have the ability to communicate outside of the questions. The average candidate, when hired, did 10% worse when I met them than if they just went through the online video recorded interview. So what the process is something like this. There's a video, somebody asking the question, or text asking the question. Then they get anywhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes, depending on the complexity of the question, to think about their answer. And then they respond. So they have no ability to use their EQ to assess, are they giving an answer that's desired for the interviewer? And that's really important. We're looking for the truth from the candidate, not their ability to modify their answers based on body language the interviewer is giving. So I actually don't want, there's no human being doing the interviewer and in the first part. On the skills interview, ideally it's the same thing if you can. That's a little more complex depending on the skills you're assessing. But the ideal interviewer comes to that interview not hungry. They've used the restroom before coming to the interview, so they're not in a hurry. Their phone is left in another room so they don't get distracted. And they are committed to only thinking about each question one at a time, not remembering the last. So like, let's say, for example, you're doing I'll do a sales interview and they did a cold call and they blew it. You need to forget the cold call. You've already scored that as you move into the discovery section and only grade them on discovery. It's hard for a lot of people to do that. And so on average, it takes about 60 hours, I found, to train a human being to focus on just what they're assessing at that moment, not all the other distractions or previous answers.
What happens, though, once the candidates actually get into the clients? Presumably they run their own interview process, interviewing the candidates, and you kind of you've sent your boy or girl over the top at that point, and they're going into enemy territory. I'm not sure if I like this analogy, but whatever. At that point, you're kind of at the behest of their interviewer skills of a human. What advice then, maybe that's a better way to put, what advice would you give if you are doing human interviews and you want to do it as well as you can? How would you approach it?
Yeah, force yourself to come up with the exact same questions you're going to ask each candidate for the role. Ask them in the exact same order and force yourself to write down a grading scale. And as an example of that, you could say, okay, a 10 is the best you've ever seen. A 9 is, I think you use like, I don't know, you could just come up with your own scale. I recommend an easier scale than that, a 1, 2, and 3. If you're really bad at interviewing, just 1 and 2, pass or fail. And then whoever passes the most questions, hire that person. Don't use all the other things that don't matter. Amazon did a really interesting study on this. They went and saw they were that if people had facial piercings, tattoos on their neck, visual things, it led to a lower likelihood of them getting the job. Now, that might matter if you're customer facing and you're on video like you and I are right now. It matters zero in all the other jobs. And so they're like, okay, we need to go in. And it's one of the reasons they got better and better at their structured interviews. Is they saw that weird things like that were having an effect. And so force yourself to come up with a standardized set of questions, a graded system, and only use the scores to do it. Now, I'll give one exception. There's an exception that I put out there. If somebody says things that are completely inappropriate, it's clear that they are a bigot, they're a racist of any kind, they are diminishing a subset of society. That's kind of the, in all cases, put the brakes on. But don't use your vibe as the reason to hire them, and instead use your score.
I'm laughing because, yeah, I'm just thinking back to my own last 6 years of experience in doing this and seeing a lot of vibe-based hiring, that's for sure. And what I tend to notice is it would more often than not be about more cultural fit things. I feel like cultural fit is this, I call it the Joker kind of hiring, where you just play it and that knocks out the candidate. It's really just you don't like them, is what it seems to be most of the time. For some reason, you can't even put your finger on it, you don't like them. If anything, I would prefer if they had in that criteria, you've got your 5 questions assessing is 5 different things in a grading score. I honestly wouldn't even care if they said, you know what, 20% of the criteria is likability. I'm going to grade them on how much I personally like them for whatever reason. Because in a way, at least that's a bit more objective. You're taking this purely vague thing and you're concrete. Maybe it almost makes sense if you're, I don't know, a consultant and part of your job is being likable. Otherwise, you won't get, new contracts. Like if there's maybe some tenuous connection. But yeah, why do people cling to vibes and feelings in hiring? What is it really?
Yeah, if you go think about it, every day we have to or get to work with those that we're surrounded by. Similarly, when we go home, we're surrounded by a little bit more of our own choice at that point. And so what people take is all of their past, plus the genetics we talked about earlier, and it creates fears. I talked with an employee just the other day, and she shared an example where, due to her past, any male that exhibits any form of masculinity, and that could be they get upset and so they squeeze their fists. It could be like, oh, they go like that. It could be anything. Due to their experience, it made them incredibly uncomfortable, and they start thinking abuse. And you go and you take somebody who uses like, oh, they're upset with themselves and they go like that because of their childhood. The vibe is immediately, they might hurt me. And so we have all of these things wired into our brains to try to protect us as human beings that might serve us, but more often than not in business don't.
Yeah, and that's one example. And imagine how many other things that person would have that they're completely unconscious of, or aren't even thinking about, or are tenuous, or they can't quite put into words. And this comes out in particular in the studies that have been done around resume screening. There's probably been similar ones in the United States. There was one here in Australia a couple of years ago where the researchers from the University of Sydney got thousands of different resumes, split it into 3 buckets based on the names that are on the resumes. Otherwise, the resumes were the same. First bucket had an Anglo-Saxon first and last name. Second bucket had Anglo first name, Chinese last name. Third bucket had Chinese sounding first and last names. They then applied to tens of thousands of jobs and just measured the rate at which the resumes got a callback or not across those 3 buckets. Basically, the callback rates were 12, 8, and 4% respectively. So if if you have a Chinese name in Australia and you apply for a job, you have 1/3 the chance, all else equal, as getting a call back compared to an Anglo-Saxon name. So if you just change your name to John Smith, you've tripled your chances. That is fact. And these experiments are pretty good. Like, it's single blind experiment. The people doing the screening have no idea they're doing it. Like, you can't really refute it. I've seen it replicated in other markets with different ethnic backgrounds. So like, I just get quite frustrated sometimes when that's the scenario. Can't we, surely we can use data to make that better? Because that is like rife discrimination and bias that is so unfair. If I were Chinese in Australia, I'd be really annoyed that that's just accepted and normal. You know what I mean?
100%. And you find it with all kinds of bizarre things. So race, language, accent. So you look at it in America, you speak a British or an Aussie accent, you're deemed more intelligent. And so all that has to happen is you hear that accent, you assume that person's brilliant. Of course, you're going to go hire them. It's like that's the voice they used when they grew up. And it's just like all of those things, if you don't take the time to force yourself, what am I actually assessing? What really matters? And then what looks great? You end up picking based on those things. And I mean, it's so true. And it's just like the research it's not even like arguable anymore. The amount of evidence that proves exactly what you said and what we've been talking about that, but in the end, people are still scared. They're scared that someone's going to hurt them. They're going to stab them in the back. They're going to be just like their ex-wife, their ex-husband, their football coach, their choir instructor, whatever it is. And so we got to hold ourselves accountable to, if we want to win in the war on talent, which is finding those few people that actually want to go in and make a difference in your company, you're going to have to be open-minded and get rid of your bias.
This is where I think there's such a huge upside for using AI in hiring. But then the whole narrative around it, at least based on the vast majority of people I've spoken to in the past 6 months, is really a lot of fear and a lot of almost comparing humans and AI in an unequal way. Like, oh, well, if we bring in AI, it's got to be transparent and we got to make sure it's not biased. We got to make sure it's fair. I'm like, I agree. Do we hold humans to that same level of account? I don't think so. And at least in theory, a good AI system could be unbiased in a way that I don't think a human ever could.
Yeah, I completely agree. The problem is AI is trained by humans. Humans are biased. And so only if you can, like, the best way I recommend for anybody listening to the podcast and you're going to go train in an AI, because this is something we're actively doing at Database, is you have to use a multi-rater human system, training an AI, so that it's not just one. Otherwise, unless you have one that is unbelievably good at it, their biases are going to creep into the AI model that you train. And so using a multi-rater system to train the AI and get the blend of many brilliant minds on that is going to be the way to get there, the kind of best approach on that. It just takes a lot of work and a commitment to it as a company. And my own belief, we are more than a decade away from before that would even become cutting edge. That to me, it did. Like right now, I don't know anybody that is doing it and committed to it. And so I think we're about a decade away from that's like where the cutting edge hiring managers are doing it. Because right now, even what we talked about, I don't know that I meet 1 in 50 managers that use a structured interview process. And so if they're not even getting a structured interview process, then they're definitely not getting to training AI to use a structured interview process.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And if anything, I feel like if I were to summarize the conversations I've had on AI and hiring, people are more using it for the periphery of hiring, as in it's like, oh, yeah, I got it to help me write a job description, which is something they don't want to do. It's more like a time-saving thing rather than an admission or a use of it in the core decision-making bit of hiring, which maybe part of that's a legislative, like there's now a lot of laws that's quite complicated across different markets where maybe you can't even do that, or if you do it, you have to make it very transparent and clear. But I feel like the sticking point is less at the moment about the large language model quality, and more about a lack of interest in actually saying, let's use AI to make decisions. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. Even myself. So job descriptions all the time. I use AI to go create the job descriptions, AI to go in and schedule meetings. But I don't know of anybody, and I'm not saying it's not out there. I guarantee it's out there, but us training an AI model to go in and do this is just, you don't need it because there's few enough people that are using AI to even do the simple things that you said. There's some, but we need to get more of that and people trusting and training the AI models. But I look forward to a world where more of this is done. And I'm glad to be part of it. And I'm really glad people like you are getting the word out there. It's like, we got to change. The world's modernizing, and too many people are being left out of the future economy because of our biased interview processes. Let's get a little more structured. Let's bring the rest of the world into the economy.
I spoke to someone on the podcast recently who said they'd first come to Australia, to Sydney in, I think, 1998, and they're at a big HR tech conference. And they were one of the speakers there. And the speaker before them was leading the Ford motor car company here in Australia. And they started their presentation by saying, cars will never be sold on the internet. Impossible. For all these reasons, like it can't work, it's biased, the technology isn't there, humans are better at doing da. Now, Ford don't even make cars in Australia anymore. So perhaps with a bit more visionary leader, we'd still have a car manufacturing industry here. But we were just struck by how similar the narrative was about hiring. It cannot be used for humans. You always need a human touch. It's impossible to replace. I feel like, is it not just inevitable, but a matter of time?
I hope so. I also thought when I started doing this video process about 15 years ago, that it would have been commonplace by now. People still, when we teach them best practices, are shocked. Like, really? And I tell them, I was like, my opinion, don't even meet the person. Be true to your core values that you advertise. Do the interview process. Offer them the job. And if you can do that fully automated and you're honest in what you're offering as a company, they're honest in their responses, which you can assess, you're going to have a more well-rounded team.
I think a big issue is that people confuse noise in hiring for signal, like things that really don't matter at all, aren't connected to what they're looking for, but kind of sound warm and fuzzy. And then that ends up being a lot of the criteria, which they should be either ignoring or not even knowing. For example, in those early screening stages, you don't need to know the person's name. If you know their name, you are suddenly adding a bit of noise that's irrelevant. And so maybe it's as much about what you measure as what you throw out, in a sense.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree. And the more things you know, and then again, now I want to be clear, anybody watching, I'm not recommending don't meet the candidate before they start. I'm saying you don't need to meet the candidate to pick a great person. Spend your personal time convincing them that this is the right company for you. You are honest in what you're advertising. You know you want to work with them, and you can't wait to start off this great business relationship together.
Dan, if you could ask our next guest any question about hiring, what would you choose to ask them?
That's a really interesting question. Um, I would be fascinated to hear a thought leader tell me why in the world they believe back channel, or sorry, not even back channel, reference checks work. Other than to screen for massive fraud, which I could get that if that's their answer. But other than that, why in the world would anybody ever give you somebody that isn't going to highly recommend them? And I just don't, that's another part of the interview process. I heard Jeffrey Smarts, I read his book, Who, and I just don't get it. And if you, in the few employees that actually stick with one company for a very long time, and maybe they've worked with the same executive team for a very long time, if they're not ready to tell those people that they're going to leave, who are they going to give you? So I'd be interested in knowing why in the world do people still do that, and why do they believe it's going to lead to a better interview process?
A wonderful question that I will level at our next guest some point next week, and I'll let you know what they say. Dan, it's been a great conversation today. Really had enjoyed having you on and hearing about your experience and all your wisdom and thoughts. And I think we've got a lot of shared experience as well, which was really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, same here, Tim. Really enjoyed it. Can't wait to see it out there and appreciate being part of it.